not dictated by a deity. It's developed from empathy, dependence, and love. My morality accepts everybody's sexuality, is more concerned with inequality and the validations from above. My morality is not set into stone tablets.
Another episode of The Nuns. Today we have with us Vic Wang of Houston Atheist, and he's also the Vice President of Houston Oasis and Humanists of Houston. Houston Atheist is the largest offline community of atheists in the world. He is a second-generation Chinese American. He was raised in Texas. He's a native Texan, and has some opinions today for us on why Asians aren't more visible in the Freethought movement. And we also have John Chu. He is he immigrated from China with his family when he was 10. He is the current acting director of CFI Toronto. He is a Chinese Canadian. And of course we have Shannon with us today, and Jack. And Shannon is going to open with questions so that you guys can kind of get to know Vic and John. Go ahead, Shannon.
Okay, great. Let's start with John Chu. First, I would like for you to talk about how you got started at CFI.
Sure. Thanks a lot for having me. I started volunteering for CFI in 2007, I believe. That's when I was in university, and I was first really started getting exposed to, philosophy and politics, all of those things. So I started to do some reading, and I encountered Richard Dawkins' writing, and then I was instantly hooked, because prior to that, I haven't really thought about these kind of issues. I've always, had a love for science. I always loved space, especially astronomy. And I always had this kind of like a global perspective, thinking that we're all humans. It doesn't really matter which nation we come from. And I have this kind of desire to see humanity rise above our differences. So after I started reading into, writings of Richard Dawkins, Carl Sagan, and especially Paul Kurtz, who is the founder of CFI, I thought, this is really something that I want to be involved with, something that really represents my values, and really kind of clarified my values, to myself even. So I started volunteering for CFI Toronto. At that time, CFI was only in Toronto. Now we have several different branches across Canada, but at that time it was just Toronto. And I also started a secular student club at my university, which is York University, and the group was Freethinkers, Skeptics, and Atheists at York, or short form is FreeSay, which I thought was pretty clever. So then I was involved at CFI for about 2 or 3 years. I was like a summer intern. I had a hand at directing the center at Toronto after we started expanding. And then school kind of got heavy, and I went back to school. I kind of stopped getting involved in the activism. And most recently, CFI Toronto is undergoing some restructuring, and their former director resigned. So I thought, I would step in. I wanted to get involved again, so I would step in and help them kind of run things until they find a more permanent person because I have to go back to school in September for Teachers College. So I'm only really here temporarily until the end of the summer.
Okay, great. Do you have any input, any advice that you would give to a new director?
Well, yeah, I mean, the way the secular movement works in Canada, I think, is quite different from how it works in the States. In the States, there's a lot more passion, I think, involved, and a lot more energy, just because there's, the opposing force is so strong. There's always religious fundamentalism, creeping up everywhere. But in Canada, it's far less visible of an issue. So you tend to have less, of the sort of like angry atheist types in our movement here. So what we want to do, or I want to do really, is to make CFI into a place like a secular alternative for community building, right? I really love hosting community events, social events. For instance, in August, we're doing this Skeptics in the Park event, which a lot of other groups have been doing successfully, and I think it's a great idea. We get together in a park and have kids running around. We do a barbecue. It just kind of builds this sense of community. So I think definitely community is the biggest thing that I would love to see CFI head towards, as well as charity events. We want to do some blood drives and other things, just to show everyone that atheists, non-religious people, are just as moral and ethical as other people, as religious people, and that we genuinely care about one another.
Okay, great. Thanks so much. Let's get some background information from Vic. Hi, Vic. How did you get started in the secular movement? Hold on, you have to unmute yourself.
All right, how's that?
That's perfect.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, it was kind of a gradual process, actually. I've never actually been religious. I mean, maybe when I was a little kid, I had certain kind of religious beliefs. But I mean, certainly in my entire adult life, I've been non-religious. Although I didn't self-identify as an atheist just until probably the last 6 or 7.
You stuck there? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, Vic froze.
Yeah, Vic might have to reload.
That's right. I remember where he stopped talking.
Maybe Vic try to reload, please. And let's try to move on here then. Okay. We'll give him a chance to reload. Okay. Are you, John? Do you want to answer some questions until he comes back?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. John, if Canada is not as much of a problem, you don't see as much of a problem as in America with religiosity and religious fundamentalism, what made you decide to get involved in the secular movement and the Center for Inquiry?
Well, as I said, a big part of what I think is really important about CFI is it provides this sense of community. Even though we're not kind of being assaulted everywhere by religious fundamentalism, there's still this need for non-religious people to have community, to find like-minded individuals and to, make friends, all that sort of thing. I think it's a very fundamental, aspect of humans is we're gregarious by and large, and we want to find other people to do activities with. So that was a big thing. And even though Canada is not very extremely religious, I think the more important aspect of the Freethought movement is our commitment to critical thinking and to, in my opinion, kind of a post-religious kind of moral and ethical framework. So, CFI is a large part of what CFI does is to promote secular humanism, which I am 100% on board with. Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned before, I've always kind of a hope for, like a better world in the future where people can see beyond their differences and cooperate. And I think what CFI does is a good step towards that.
So not just community building, but also promoting humanism?
Yes, humanism and critical thinking.
And critical thinking.
Yeah.
Okay. I see Vic is back there. Do you need a minute to set up, Vic? Yeah, that's what he's doing. Okay. I got distracted there. Okay.
Okay, sorry about that, but yeah, I think I'm good now.
Okay. Shannon, do you want to finish asking Vic questions, or
maybe we should start that one over?
Yeah. Do you just want to start over talking with answering how you got interested and how you started getting into the secular movement?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay.
All right, so yeah, for me it was kind of a gradual process. I certainly my entire adult life I've never been religious. I mean, I've never been formally religious in any way. My my parents never indoctrinated me in any way, and they never even talked about religion whatsoever, actually, while I was growing up. So when I was a kid, I maybe had some sort of spiritual God beliefs or whatever. But yeah, my entire adult life I've been an atheist. Whether not that I necessarily identified as one, but reflecting back on it, that's what I've pretty much always been. But as far as I never really felt the impetus to really get involved in any kind of atheist organizations until maybe the last 5 or 6 years. I think what played a big role for me when I first read Why People Believe Weird Things by Michael Shermer. That was a huge eye-opener. I mean, it kind of reiterated a lot of the things that I felt without really being able to really verbalize it and really understand it in detail. But when I read that book, it was just this huge, like, wow, this is kind of like, kind of captures my worldview, but really just lays it all out there just so clearly, explaining the psychological phenomena behind why people believe in supernatural things, including religion. And so that got me interested in the whole concept of the skepticism movement, and reading up further on that. And then one day I decided, you know what, I'm going to try to find a good book on presenting the other side. I wanted to hear what is the evidence for God, what's the evidence for religion, and I picked up a book called God, the Evidence. And I also picked up another book by Michael Shermer called How We Believe. And I decided I was going to read both books, and just to see which side really has the stronger arguments. And it was no contest. I mean, yeah, I mean, basically, and that's the ironic thing is How We Believe was not even an argument for atheism. It was really just a book about the psychological phenomena behind belief without necessarily discrediting the idea of God being, existing, and just kind of presenting his research that he had and other research about the demographics of religion in America and whatnot. So anyway, I was not impressed at all, certainly, by God the Evidence, and then since then I've read many more books from the Christian perspective, as well as many more on the atheist perspective, and all of my initial impression has been further borne out many times over. But anyway, it was actually when I saw the documentary, The God Who Wasn't There, back in about, I think it was 05, 06, and that kind of made me just realize, this is something important that maybe I should start looking into, getting involved in, at least seeking out what kind of organizations are out there. See if there are organizations dedicated towards atheists or whatever. So yeah, and then that's when I just started looking. And here in Houston, I'm very fortunate to have ended up here in Houston because we have several different Freethought related organizations. I kind of just tried one out, then found another, and yeah, and they all have something to offer. They all have kind of their own unique spin on things, or as far as what it is, what type of an organization they're trying to run, what types of events they are looking to do, and so and yeah, so then let's see. But I was more or less, I would attend events and get to know people and just kind of be social and enjoy the organizations. But it wasn't until 2011 when we actually hosted here in Houston the 2011 Texas Freethought Convention, which was the also that year, it was also the Atheist Alliance International National Convention combined into one. So I was actually invited to be on the planning committee for that event, and so which was just an incredible experience, just incredibly educational experience, to being able to see behind the scenes of organizing a major atheist convention and just kind of seeing what kind of logistics are involved in getting of implementing it, what's involved in promotion, what's involved, just all the kinds of things that it takes to run something like that. And of course, got a lot of people who are very key figures in, well, certainly the local Freethought movement, but and also the national movement. And so the convention was, I would say, it was pretty successful. We had over 700 attendees at it, which we had which at the time was the largest convention, atheist convention, most attendance at an atheist convention, I believe, in American history, up until the Reason Rally, which obviously shattered that record. But yeah, so yeah, it was, we had Christopher Hitchens, Richard Dawkins, Michael Shermer, who's a list of speakers. And so yeah, that was an awesome experience. And it was after that, then I really kind of dove in and got to be a part of one of the assistant organizers for Houston Atheists, now co-organizer. Then I got involved with Humanists of Houston, and then Houston Oasis. So yeah, it was just kind of domino effect, I guess, and just getting more and more involved, and to where now it's pretty much taking up every last bit of my free time is in some way dedicated towards involvement in these organizations now. So yeah, that's it. That's pretty much it.
It sounds like you've been immensely busy. What would you say, just briefly, is your favorite part about activism within the secular community?
Well, let's see. I will say one thing that's very rewarding is when I talk to the members. Many of our members, especially here in Houston, they say that they basically have no exposure whatsoever to anybody who's of like-minded beliefs or lack of beliefs in their day-to-day lives. A lot of members have said this, that at work they're the only person who's even remotely an atheist. Some people say that among family they're the only one. And so yeah, I mean, a lot of people have said that when they come to our events and are able to meet other atheists and really just not have to hold back and be able to freely express themselves, it's just sort of a huge relief and just sort of, a huge, support. It's essentially like a support system for them. And yeah, we actually had a booth at the Houston's annual Gay Pride Festival just a few weeks ago, where we were there to promote Houston atheists, and the reactions to some of the people that just seeing that we existed was just so amazing. I mean, we actually had one person that came up and was just in tears, actually, just couldn't stop, crying tears of joy because she just had no idea there was such a thing. And it was just so amazing to her that there was not only a atheist organization, but in our case, what we bill ourselves as is the world's largest atheist organization with, I think we just passed 2,250 members just last week. So yeah, that's I would have to say seeing something like that is the most rewarding, and also just hearing the feedback from the members that we do have of how valuable this type of an organization is, and the types of events that we put on for them, and yeah, just how much of a difference it makes, a real difference, in their lives. So it doesn't get much better than that.
So you sound like you're doing it for the same motivations that John is, to create community. And also, one similarity, I was talking to John earlier, is that you and John didn't have a lot of religious experiences growing up. It wasn't an issue with either of your families. Do you think that had something to do with Chinese culture? Either John or Vic can answer the question.
Okay. Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll take a stab at it. I mean, yeah, I mean, the demographics of Asians in general, Asians worldwide, is that, yeah, there is a lot of lack of religiosity, not necessarily, active atheism or strident atheism or being, outspoken about the lack of religion. But yeah, I mean, I think the facts are, the demographics have shown that, yeah, it is in a large segment of the Asian population, it's just kind of a non-issue. And even the Eastern religions that do tend to get, the Asian religions that are out there, they don't tend to have this fundamentalist, extremist, slant to them that would kind of inspire people to, kind of try and fight back against it. Eastern religion, as a general rule, tends to be much less focused on, for example, belief and the necessity of belief for purposes of salvation, for example, that you see in Judeo-Christian, religions. And that makes a big difference. I mean, that makes all the difference in the world, really, when you talk about it's more about just living well, living with good principles, and it's not that you have to believe certain things in order to go to heaven. And it's really more, and this is kind of a generalization here. It's not really, certainly there are Eastern religions with extremists, in Eastern religious groups, but I think there are definitely key fundamental differences there, which would kind of explain why, explain that.
We're talking about Asian, but for today's purposes, we're talking about East Asians, like China and Vietnam, Laos, Thailand, but also a lot of people don't think of Indians, Pakistanis, Bangladesh as Asia, but those are South Asians, and we'll get into that in next week. So I just wanted to clarify what we're talking about with Asian. I had a different experience. I'm Eurasian. My mother is from Vietnam. Vietnam was once a French colony. Vietnam currently is a very, very atheist, secular country, but there is a significant amount of Catholics in Vietnam from French colonialism. And so I was raised Catholic on my mother's side. So there is a little bit of religious diversity in East Asian countries. China, I think, has been historically a very secular country, and there are a lot of countries that in East Asia that are secular. John, um, my question for you: what was your religious upbringing? If any?
Well, similar to Vic, really, I didn't really have much contact with religion, at least organized religion. And that's mainly just simply due to the fact that China, under the communist government, is very secular and very atheistic, because they frown upon any kind of belief in any kind of religion. Really, it's a part of their propaganda to be it's a part of their communist ideology. But that said, Chinese people, I find, are not just because they're atheists, it doesn't mean they're critical thinkers. In fact, quite the opposite. So a lot of Chinese people are very superstitious, for example. And my grandparents, for example, even though they're pretty well educated, like my grandmother was a high school teacher, they still kind of retain that kind of traditional ancestor worship, right? So every week, every month, we would put up like an offering to our ancestors, burn some paper money, that kind of thing. So I mean, Vic pointed out a really good point, is that historically China really hasn't been religious at all. The major kind of philosophical schools in China, namely Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism, with Confucianism being the predominant kind of political philosophy, it is not supernatural, right? It has sets of ethical, moral precepts, but it doesn't say anything. It doesn't have like a supernatural mythology. So historically, China hasn't been religious, and then after the communists took over, they are avowedly anti-religious. But the other point that you were asking is, why aren't Chinese people more involved in like the kind of atheist free thought issues? I think a big part of that is because they're just simply not interested. Because Chinese society currently is very fixated on wealth generation, and I think that's because they went through a lot of extremely political and social upheavals in the past century, and all the older generations have lived through some very tough times. So, namely, for instance, a cultural revolution where millions were persecuted in order to get rid of this kind of traditional culture and replace it with communist ideologies. And there's been some terrible natural disasters, famine, population explosion under the communist rule. And now, with the recent extremely rapid economic growth, it's really become quite a dog-eat-dog world, and people who grasp the opportunity become really extremely rich, and the most ruthless kind of people are the most successful. So, so people really, their entire existence are built around creating wealth and making money. So they don't have time to worry about anything else. And especially after people have kind of lost faith in communism as this guiding ideology, especially after the Tiananmen Square uprising, people have, they just think, oh, well, what we've believed in actually isn't true. They said that we're going to create this wonderful society, and now all we have is oppression and authoritarianism. They kind of just lost faith in being moral, being ethical. So they just think of money. Case in point, there are I'm not sure. There's this video that went viral on the internet a few years ago where there's this Chinese kid got run over on the street and nobody helps, right? Like it just all these cars and people biking, they go by and they don't. Nobody helps until this like old lady who's sweeping the floor sees the kid and rushes over and helps. It really kind of shows how like the direction that Chinese society has gone, where really people aren't really humane anymore. I think that's a really big problem. And you know, a lot of people, I've heard a lot of atheists say, "Oh, look at China! You know, what a great place. It's completely secular." But I don't think that's enough, right? Just because it's secular doesn't really mean that it's a good country if the people are good people. Because they're secular for the wrong reason. They're secular because the government told them to be secular, right?
Isn't that an Eastern and Western thing? You're talking about what people value, whether they value humanism and compassion, or whether they value their day-to-day life of acquiring more money and wealth. Isn't this Western and Eastern?
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure it's a universal struggle between these different important things in life. It's just I feel that in China specifically, with the historical and social environment, it kind of generated this situation where people are far more concerned with wealth than any other problem, any other thing in life.
I know anecdotally, my mother's Vietnamese, but it was always, you're going to be a doctor. You're going to go to college and you're going to be a doctor. So I can kind of anecdotally confirm what you're saying. I kind of got the vibe that Asian culture is very much impressed with status and wealth, and I think what got me involved in free thinking and atheism is wanting more than just that, wanting the world to be a better place. So that's why I think that's what gets people involved, like John and Vic, is a different type of value system. It's what you value, what you rank is most important. And that's how we could get more people involved in being more compassionate human beings, if we could create a culture, I think, of valuing. And some people think that comes from religion, that the morals in religion instill this value for the rest of this compassion for the rest of mankind. But I don't think historically that's borne out historically, that whenever you have a religious culture, that you see automatically more compassionate human beings. That's my opinion on it. And I guess we can move to another question here. Why do you? I think part of what you're saying is that there is a lack of interest in free thinking issues, both in Asia and with Asians who have immigrated to different parts of the world, where, like Toronto, where there might be a free thinking atmosphere. So is that the primary reason why we don't see more Asian faces in the free thought movement, despite our numbers?
Well, I have a thought on that. Well, I agree. I agree with what John was saying. I think another thing too is when it comes to any kind of minority involvement in any kind of a movement or organization, when there are very few of a given minority, it makes it that much less likely for them to want to be involved and to feel welcome and to is kind of a chicken or egg situation, you know. And I know that that's something that, speaking from our experience here with Houston Atheists, we've actually taken a lot of a very proactive role, for example, in really trying to get involvement and bring out members from the Black atheist community, because we have realized that it is a very difficult situation, especially for them, considering just how pervasive religion is in the Black community, just how much it influences their lives, and how much you know, it's so taboo, even more so in America in general, even more so in the Black community, even more taboo to identify as being an atheist. And of course, you know, the fact that when there are not a lot of you know, Black or any minority, whatever it is, members of a group, well, if they are to come out to an event and they're the only person of a particular of their ethnicity or race, yeah, it makes it very hard for them. I mean, me personally, I'm used to being the only Asian at events that I go to, not just atheist events, but I've always experienced that, and it's nothing new to me. But I mean, yeah, I can understand certainly that, and I've spoken with numerous members who have expressed that it is very hard, you know, especially being a double minority like a Black atheist and coming out to an event, being the only one there. It's very intimidating. It's just a very you know, hard thing to hurdle to get over. So what we've actually done, we've really made a proactive effort to really trying to not recruit, but to put on events. We've had specific events that we call Black atheist meet and greets, which is it's not just for Black atheists. In fact, the idea is it's for everybody to come out, and especially for the Black atheists to come out and see that they're not alone. Also have non-Black members out there to also support them and to show them, you know, what we're all about, welcome them to the group. We also recently had a Black atheist panel discussion that I put together, which was a group of Houston Atheist members who were Black atheists, and they were able to essentially just share their story openly, and we had a, you know, group discussion, Q&A, and it was a great event, very, you know, very illuminating just into what it's like to be part of that, go through that experience. And then, yeah, so we've done several. We had the Day of Solidarity, actually, which some of you may have heard of. That's actually kind of held nationwide. We actually, the person who, Donald Wright, came up with that idea to have that day every year for Black freethinkers. Well, anyway, all that is just a way to say that, you know, sometimes it takes kind of these kinds of efforts. You know, hey, maybe we should start putting together some of these things to try and get the Asian community out, you know, the Asian, because yeah, like I said, it's been very successful. We've seen a big increase in our membership of Black atheists, and so we've really seen the results. So, and yeah, I mean, we haven't, not to say that there's necessarily the same issues at play between Black and Asian atheists. You know, I think that, you know, there certainly is not that same degree of stigma in the Asian community, so there's certainly differences there, but yeah, you know, maybe those are the types of things that will, you know, maybe we need to be more proactive, is I guess what I'm saying, in trying to get Asian atheists out and just see that this is something that's worth being a part of. This is something important and something that, you know, there's other Asian atheists out there just like them. So yeah, you know,
when we think of Asians in Canada and America, we think of that as a smaller minority than African Americans and Hispanics. But both John and Vic live in a city that has a higher than normal Asian population. Toronto is a very diverse city, and a lot of people don't think of Houston as diverse, but it is. 1 out of every 5 people in Houston.
Yeah, well, in fact,
city.
Yeah, well, in fact, Houston is now considered the most diverse, is officially the most diverse racially of any major city in the U.S. And that largely is because of just the last few years of how much the demographics have shifted in Houston. So yeah, it's actually pretty crazy how much how multicultural Houston has has become.
Is that the same also in Toronto, John, with ethnic diversity?
Yeah, I mean, Toronto is so diverse that it's almost not an exaggeration to say that if you're white, you're a minority. You know, like you know, Chinese people, Asian people are kind of just become a common fixture of the background, you know, diversity. So it's funny because when Hammett emailed me asking me what I thought about, you know, Asians in the free thought movement, and asking me if I am the first leader of a national atheist organization in North America. I was surprised because honestly I never really thought about it, because here in Toronto, you know, being an Asian and as a leader of any organization is just, it's commonplace. I mean, I agree with Vic that we should move, you know, we should approach other minority groups for the sake of diversity in the movement. I think it's probably more difficult with, you know, East Asians just because of the language barrier, right? They would have to have a relatively sophisticated grasp of the English language to even be able to converse, you know, about, you know, these kind of issues. Of course, more and more people, Asians, Chinese, today they are starting to think about these kind of issues more, I see, simply because, you know, they've got wealth, right? They've collected wealth, and now they're looking beyond to see what's next, right? What should we worry about in life that is not money? And it's difficult, but I think it's starting to move towards that. The one worrying thing for me about China specifically, I don't really have that much knowledge about how it is in other East Asian countries, but in China, I mentioned that there's this kind of moral vacuum after this disappointment in communist ideology. After that, because people aren't used to thinking critically, it's kind of been, you know, bred out of them through propaganda, through the educational system, which, by the way, is really difficult to teach about critical thinking in China right now, because there's this massive university entrance exam that all high school students have to go through, and it really, the success in that exam really determines your success in life, right? If you don't do well, you won't get into a good university, you will be left behind by society, you won't get a good job. So, you know, every child, basically their life from birth to graduation of high school is dedicated towards studying and getting a good test score on the exam. So they don't really have time to think about any other things. And the way that they do well on the exam is by rote memorization, is to not be taught how to think about problems, but be taught to memorize large quantities of facts, information, to be able to do well on the exam. So they're not good critical thinkers. They've never been taught, and it's not encouraged. And because of that, you know, when people are unhappy because of how society is working, of their life not being fulfilled, they probably tend to gravitate towards simple explanations. Like, this is, I think, a very great strength of religions, is its ability to provide that kind of comfort to people who don't like to think critically about issues. So now in China, you are getting this upsurge of religiosity. Christianity is extremely fast growing in China. And, you know, various other religions as well. If you're, you know, if you have kind of evangelical bend, you can spread your religion very, very rapidly in China. And again, because of the lack of critical thinking, there's a lot of pseudoscientific things that are really taking hold in China. For instance, the New Age movement in the West kind of gets a lot of their it was influenced by East Asian religions, right, like Buddhism, Hinduism. So this New Age kind of semi-religion mythology is now being exported back into China, and a lot of people are believing in these kind of things like ghosts, like meditation.
I think the ghost thing is very native, though, to
That's true.
Asian mysticism because of ancestor worship, and also the native beliefs of herbalism. It's either black or white rhino is extinct because of the Asian belief that its horn has some kind of power.
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily a religion belief. It's more equivalent to, like you're saying, the Western New Age movement. And also, I think the other interesting point you're making is that in China, perhaps they don't have secular values. They are secular because their government is secular for authoritarian reasons. It isn't because they've come to value it on their own.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Is that what you want to foster with CFI? Is people valuing secular ideas?
Oh, for sure, definitely. I mean, just think about how complex society is getting, and how complex problems are that are facing, the entire world, China, Canada, the U.S., and really a lot of these issues, they really need a population that is capable of processing these information and to be able to influence the government with regards to policy making. And one particular movement, a direction that China is going towards in recent years is that it is starting to, like the central government is starting to loosen its grip on the populace, and that people are more slowly, in very minute ways, are starting to be able to influence how policies are made and how things go. And one of the tools that has facilitated this is the internet, right? Even though Twitter and Facebook are banned in China, they have their own versions, which are pretty much identical, right? They have this thing called Weibo, which is exactly like Twitter. It's just a Chinese version. And it has, since its inception a few years ago, it has really exploded. Now everyone has a Weibo account, and they use that to report on government corruption, on environmental disasters, on these terrible things that are going on in society, and it's really becoming quite a force. So with this growing influence of the people on the government, on how things are run, it is really, I think, more and more important for these people to know what they're talking about, to be able to distinguish the bad information from the good information on the internet.
Authority.
Sorry, yeah. To question authority, but also know why they're questioning authority, right?
Right. And know how to evaluate a claim, like if someone is telling them that a certain herb or part of an animal will cure their illness, they need to know how to evaluate that to know whether that is good medicine or a waste of time.
Right.
JREF here has that mission with homeopathy and alternative medicine.
Yeah, and just to give an example, based on my research interests, I'm doing my master's degree in climate change education, and I was doing some research in China this past summer. And I've interviewed a lot of teachers about how they teach climate change, and by and large, they say that the government's position is that climate change is real, right? And it's taught in the curriculum. So there's really no doubt about it in the minds of most Chinese people. But there's this growing climate change denial presence on Chinese internet. And if you just look for climate change denial in Chinese into Google, you'll see like the top however many pages are discussion forums about climate change denial and whether or not it is like a legitimate thing. And a lot of people are supporters of climate change denial. So it's just like one example of how a lack of critical thinking can creep into society in a very negative way.
And there's also the lack of understanding of the scientific method, and also a lack of understanding of how to scientifically evaluate claims like climate change. If they knew how to read studies and process information on why climate change is real, they wouldn't be able to just deny it based on unscientific people who are feeding them this misinformation.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't understand how to scientifically evaluate a claim. And if they did, they would be less apt to fall for people who are charlatans or giving out bad information. That happens also here in the West a lot. There are a lot of shysters with not just climate denialism, that's really popular, but a number of other things like evolution. 46% of the populace in the United States accepts that the Earth is less than 10,000 years old. So there's a fundamental disconnect with reality in favor of easier religious explanations, easier folk type medicine and folk type explanations that are easier for people to understand. It takes a lot of effort to be educated and to understand why something is right or wrong or evaluate a claim. And it's easier to fall back on old wives' tales for a lot of people. It is very, very common, the lack of critical thinking. Vic had a question for John.
Yeah, John, one of the points you made earlier when you were talking about the connection between atheism and communism, I'd be curious to hear just kind of your take on, for example, like I have some friends in Germany who we've talked a lot about the differences between Germany and the U.S., and one of the big ones is they're very, very anti-violence, both in terms of war and just any kinds of violence, even just in film or whatever. And they both felt very strongly that it does have a lot to do with the history of violence that Germany has. That now there's just this big aversion to that because of that history. So I wonder. I mean, I've kind of wondered this myself, if perhaps some certainly Chinese atheists have a reluctance to. Even more of a reluctance than they would otherwise to use that word, just because of perhaps its association with communism, and maybe they want to avoid any kinds of connection, any kind of connection to that. So, what do you think? I mean,
yeah, I mean,
what your take is on that?
That's possible. Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's whenever I guess, I mean, again, I'm no expert in these kind of sociological discussions, but I can only give my opinion. But I think that whenever there is this kind of dominant social force or movement, dominates everything, there is likely to be like a reactionary force to it. So in China, I guess a way for people to be rebellious against the government would be to say that everything that they say is wrong, right? So if you're saying that atheism is right, then it must be, to be against the communist government must therefore be to be religious in some way or to have spirituality. And anecdotally, I do know a couple of people, like my uncle in China. The couple of times that I went back last time and we had some discussions about religion and about politics, and he is pretty strongly on the side of, there is really no truth, right? And I think a part of that is his upbringing, his experience of being kind of oppressed under the communist government. So now when I tell him about scientific method and consensus, he says that, oh, that's all, influenced by money, corporations, which, I mean, he has a good point when it comes to China, because the peer review process in China is absolutely corrupt. There's so many problems with it. People can plagiarize, they can pay money to get their papers published. It's horrible. Like I'm not surprised that people are losing their faith in the institution of science in China. But yeah, I mean, I think it's possible, but I have a feeling that most people are still, non-religious just because they've been brought up not being religious, right? Just because the social environment is just not conducive to it. So, like, religion is fast growing in China, but the majority of the people are still non-religious.
That's an interesting point too, because you see in some other East Asian countries like Korea that are very, very secular and have a high percentage of atheists. You see a resurgence of fundamentalism, and, like, for example, they have one of the largest mega churches in the world in Korea, and fundamentalism is starting to gain in popularity. And I think it goes back to what you're saying, that people need to adopt secular values through critical thinking, not because that's the way it's always been, out of some sort of apathy. What do you think about what's happening in Korea and other parts of Asia where fundamentalism is having a resurgence?
Well, I guess I have a bit of a thought on that. Well, I was interested in why it is that it seems that, particularly here in the U.S., you do have a lot of South Koreans who are very Christian specifically. Why? And I was curious about that. Why is Christianity so prevalent among the South Korean population here? And it turns out, yeah, I mean, it's actually certainly by East Asian standards, it's very prevalent in South Korea as well. And it all goes back, from my understanding of it, essentially, that was kind of a reaction to going through the Korean War, going through horrible times, and that was kind of their way of kind of showing a solidarity with each other, a way of rallying and showing unity. That was their way of handling that, and that's when you kind of started seeing this big resurgence in religiosity. And it's interesting when you compare that with Japan, for example. After the World War II, you saw the opposite. Tremendous secularization, and I always kind of wondered what was the big difference, why kind of each country kind of went into different directions after going through very, very difficult times. And I think, well, I've heard one reason, of course, is that with World War II, their leader was seen as a divine figure, and so of course after they lost, that was a huge blow to their worldview right there, so that apparently had a very big effect on that. But yeah, it's interesting just kind of to see how religiosity, I guess, can potentially thrive in the worst of times. I think that's certainly the more common phenomenon that we've seen. I mean, if you look at the countries around the world, not just in Asia, but everywhere, there's a very strong correlation between religiosity and quality of life and happiness, inverse relationship. You know, where people have it the toughest, where life is hardest, shortest, and you have the most suffering. That's also where you have the most religiosity. So, but yeah, so that's it.
With Korea, it might be they have a lot of evangelical activity there, exported from the West, and it may be that these churches are a good networking opportunity to meet others and make money. One interesting thing, I don't know the most about Asian culture because I have Asian family members, but I wasn't raised in an Asian country, and I don't speak my mother's language. One interesting thing I think that is they have that a lot of native Asian religions aren't as fundamental as some of the Western Abrahamic religions, but they seem to have this almost supernatural belief in luck. Have you guys noticed that too? Like on Chinese New Year, it's a tradition to gamble, and they have this. Yeah, luck is a real element.
And numerology.
Yes.
Yeah, astrology, numerology. Yeah, all that stuff, symbolism.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it goes along with the superstitious nature of Chinese people. I'm not sure if you can say that Chinese people historically have been more superstitious than other people. I don't know if you can make like how you would even make that kind of comparison, but certainly today, contemporary Chinese people are incredibly superstitious. You know, they would do all sorts of stuff to if they think that it might give them an edge in life, right? Like hanging the character for luck upside down on the door is basically everyone does it, and to do that means the character, the word for upside down sounds like the word for arriving. So it would mean that luck or fortune is arriving to your door if you hang the character for fortune upside down. So there's that. There's, yeah, again, numerology, as Vic said, feng shui. You know, all of these beliefs are rampant, in Chinese, in the Chinese culture and in the Chinese mindset for sure.
Luck is a real thing because you have only so many choices in life, no matter how hard you work, depending on where you live, who you were born to. So there is a real element of luck. But what I seem to notice is that in Asian culture, there's an actual attempt to manipulate luck, as if you can get luck for yourself, like John was saying, by hanging the word luck upside down on your door. But I always found that an interesting thing. There's one last thing. I think we're at maybe a point where we're going to wrap up here soon. We were talking about how few Asians there are in the United States and Canada. I believe in the United States there are 12 million Asians, and a lot of the Asian populations are centered in different parts of the country, like Houston, and I would think that that's the same thing with Canada and Toronto. So I still think, despite the cultural problems like the insular nature of Asian cultures and feeling different from free thinking gatherings if they're the only minority there. I still think that we should see more diversity at our gatherings, especially where there are large Asian populations. There must be other atheists, especially in Houston, Texas, who feel alone and would like to gather and would like to influence having secular values and humanist values in society. What are some things that we could do? Do you think that that would attract more Asian diversity to these gatherings?
Well, one thought I have on that is, you know, well, I mentioned earlier as far as wanting to, you know, obviously it helps to put on the events, the types of events that would attract members of whatever group you're trying to you know, target. But of course, you don't want to, you know, go too far and make it just, you know, just these stereotypical, like, oh, we're going to go out to a tapioca tea house, you know, or oh, we're going to go see karaoke. You know, it's you got to be pretty careful about that. And but yeah, I mean, so it's kind of, you know, you kind of have to try to find a fine line there. But I mean, I think that, yeah, I think it does take a proactive approach and just try to get the message out. And then here's another thing too. I mean, this seems to be pretty universal among the free thought organizations that I'm familiar with. That, you know, you have really kind of a small minority of people who really come out and attend the events on a regular basis. There's a huge amount of untapped people who are members of your organization and maybe kind of know what's going on. They receive the emails and whatnot, but you know, typically it's, from my experience, it's about a third or so of the members, total membership, that really is active and coming out and attending the events. Yeah, I think with most organizations, there probably are many, you know, Asian, whether it's Asian or whatever, members out there that are members, that are getting the mailing lists, I mean the emails, and that just need to, you know, if you can show them that, yeah, there are events that they'd be interested in coming out to, and that there are other Asian Americans just like them, or Asian Canadians, that are also in these organizations. They're not going to be alone. You know, maybe that's all it takes.
So you're saying more Asian leadership, more Asian representation in free thought organizations?
Yeah, well, you know what? Yeah, that's actually, yeah, I guess I wasn't specifically talking about that, but yeah, I think that's definitely a factor. You know what? Actually, one story that just came to mind that happened just a few months, well, last year. We had a member who was Pakistani American. And he had been a member for months and months, but he just never really just had that, you know, urge enough to come out and actually, you know, show up in person. But he followed kind of what was going on. He got the emails. Well, one day for Humanists of Houston, we actually had an event that was, our guest speaker was a Pakistani American humanist. And that's what prompted him to come out. He's like, wow, okay. Not only is there another Pakistani American atheist, but he's actually the guest speaker. So he came out. That's what prompted him to come out, and we got to know him. He ended up getting more and more involved, and he's now actually an officer with both Humanists of Houston and Houston Oasis, and he was there the whole time. But you know, it just took that one event for him to see it and be like, hey, I want to go check this out.
Yeah, and you're saying it's a fine line. You don't want to be too stereotypical, like having a Chinese New Year party or something. But I think there's still some things that can be done. Like, do you guys have any contact information for anybody who sees this, who has ideas on what they would like to see to attract more Asian diversity?
Yeah, I mean, anyone is interested, come to the website of CFI Canada, and there's contact emails on that to email. I think, yeah, obviously, to do these kind of events like doing karaoke's, or to try to appeal to Asians, is almost condescending.